Mr. Eric Dubay has been quite quiet on the whole flat Earth NASA front lately. Of course, with Perseverance going to Mars, it's rattled his cage. I want to give massive thanks to all of my supporting members and patrons. Thank you all so very much. Alright, Mr. Derpy Double Down Dubay, let's see what you got. Roll VT.
Last week, NASA, the biggest black budget black hole in existence, sucking in $52 million of American taxpayer money every single day, just spent $2.3 billion of your dollars to allegedly land a remote control car on Mars for the 5th time.
Well, NASA costs around 0.5% of the federal budget, whereas the defence budget is around 13%. And for every dollar spent on NASA, it earns back about 8. Sounds like a big bargain to me.
Yes, the multi-billion-dollar charade of landing on Mars has been happening since 1976, and thanks to the gullible, unquestioning masses enthralled and duped by these ridiculous Hollywood performances, they will most likely continue for decades to come.
Good, because there are massive benefits way beyond the satisfying the answers to questions. There's all sorts of side products that come out of things like NASA. For instance, GPS, kidney dialysis machines, hell, even freeze-dried food. It's a wonderful thing.
To begin with, the tiny reddish circular light in the sky known as Mars is not a spherical terra firma world millions of miles away capable of landing a rover on.
I'm afraid it is, you know.
All of the so-called planets were known to the ancients as wandering stars.
Yes, because they look like stars and they appeared to wander about. Your point?
Because they differ from the fixed stars in their relative motions only. To them, stars were not spherical worlds millions of miles away, or suns trillions of miles away, as we are brainwashed to believe they are today.
And why do you think the ancients used to think that? They didn't have binoculars, they didn't have telescopes. All they could see was what does appear to be very bright stars that happen to move around.
Stars were and are simply luminaries, immaterial lights in the sky, several thousand, not millions, of miles away, that revolve over and around the Earth.
Well, with redshift you can tell how far stars are, and they're a lot further than a few thousand miles. With parallax you can measure the distance to the nearest stars, and it's a lot further than several thousand miles away. Oh, and by the way, there's something wrong with your focus.
The Masonic magicians at NASA and the other world space agencies, using lying actor-nauts and Hollywood tricks like green screens, wires, harnesses, and endless amounts of CGI images, through pseudoscience books and programs, mass media and public education, universities and government propaganda, have systematically indoctrinated the entire world into believing what is nothing but an elaborate piece of science fiction.
You use your tongue prettier than a $20 whore.
Now, you're not going to see Mars like that image on the left with a home telescope, but you can do a darn sight better than that image on the right. That Nikon is grossly out of focus, and the reason it's twinkling is because of atmospheric aberration. Learn to focus.
As you can clearly see for yourself with a bit of research, a telescope or high-zoom camera, and an open, discerning mind actually honestly admitting to yourself what is and what isn't a CGI, computer-generated image, it is obvious that the light in the sky known as Mars is not some science fiction desert planet millions of miles away.
There's two possibilities here, Eric. Either you're totally incompetent and can't use a camera or a telescope, or you're willfully lying.
The CGI images NASA shows of a spherical world are clearly and admittedly not photographs, and look nothing like Mars when seen through a telescope.
Oh no, there are plenty of photographs of Mars.
Meanwhile, the actual photographs NASA claims are coming from this completely other world look exactly like they are coming from Devon Island, Canada.
Source for those images, please, Eric, because those two are the same photograph, just colorized. I do not believe for one moment that the Mars photo has been issued by and claimed to be Mars from NASA.
With a red tint added in post-processing. There is nothing being shown in NASA's photographs of Mars that cannot easily be faked on Earth.
Well, I suppose you could try faking Mars, but you need some evidence to show that NASA's doing it, not just grabbing some photos from somewhere and faking it yourself and saying it could be done. And good luck doing it with the Mars rover video. And Eric, you incredulous little turnip, if NASA were presenting that Mars photo as Mars and having faked it, do you think that they would not have the capability to have removed the clouds? And also, if they were going to try and pass this off, don't you think that they would have made sure that the original undoctored version would not be available to the public?
And given the lack of skepticism or scrutiny from the gullible masses, they barely have to fake any evidence too. Just give them a computer screen of a CGI parachute with a CGI rover landing on a CGI Mars, and film a bunch of compartmentalized NASA 20-something employees straight out of space camp getting giddy and high-fiving each other. And that is literally all it takes.
Wow, Eric. So someone can take a photo, colour adjust it and make it look like Mars. Fine. Now all you have to do is show that NASA has done this. We'll wait.
The unquestioning masses now thoroughly believe NASA has landed their fifth remote control car tens of millions of miles away and are receiving photographs from it through the internet.
Source for that NASA photo? And let's assume that that is a NASA Mars photo. We already know you can adjust images. I would very much suspect that a flat earther has adjusted the NASA one to look like Earth. It cuts both ways.
That's right. How do you think NASA sends and receives all data to and from this remote control car? They apparently have internet technology so strong and fast that they can operate a remote control vehicle from tens of millions of miles away.
Did IQs just drop sharply while I was away?
What do you think they got? Some fancy long fibre optic cable going to Mars? Eric, it's all done with radio broadcasts, which happen at the speed of light, which takes about 11 minutes to get to Mars. To control the rover, they're not steering it left, right, up, down, whatever. They'll send it some commands like go 5 meters forward, and then it will navigate itself 5 meters forward. This isn't rockets. Or maybe it is.
Do we, the public, have any independent evidence whatsoever that such technology actually exists?
No, Eric, we don't have any independent evidence that such technology exists. Because for such technology to exist, what would we have to do, Scotty?
I can't change the laws of physics.
Of course not, and it isn't necessary. Again, because the science fiction indoctrinated masses are so bedazzled by their pseudoscientific priests at NASA that they don't require things like proof or evidence.
Oh, and we're waiting for your proof or evidence of a flat Earth, a dome over it, the fact that we can't go to Mars, stars being several thousand miles away, not light years away. We're waiting, Eric. We are waiting.
As NASA actornaut Don Pettit stated, "I would go back to the moon in a nanosecond, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again." So that is their excuse for why we haven't been back to the moon in 50 years. Because they destroyed the technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
Yes, indeed, Eric. A time-consuming, expensive and difficult process. Now, if you wanted to make, let's say, a brand new 1957 Chevy Bel Air, how the hell are you going to do it? The factories that made it no longer have the lines, or the tooling doesn't exist. I'm sure there's parts that are no longer in manufacture. So how are you going to do it without a time-consuming and expensive and painful process?
But apparently they have had the tech since 1976, just a few years after the Apollo missions, to send Viking to Mars, which is allegedly over 100 times further away than the moon.
Yes, but then with Viking you didn't have to worry about the effect of radiation on the astronauts. You didn't have to worry about transporting food, oxygen, keeping them warm. It's a totally different prospect. One was manned missions, the other is a probe, an automatic probe.
Now let's talk about the supposed parachutes deployed by these rovers when landing. NASA says the surface pressure on Mars is only 0.3% of the surface pressure on Earth, and equivalent to the pressure at about 23 miles above Earth.
Well, at last you got something right, Eric. My MAGE high-altitude balloon experiment went up to about 24 miles, and the atmospheric pressure at that point was about 1/3%.
This fact alone blows their hopes out of the water. Any skydiver knows there is not nearly enough air matter at that pressure to provide any kind of lift for opening and billowing out the parachutes NASA uses to land its Mars probes.
Good point, Eric. However, I do see two problems with it. Firstly, any skydiver won't be jumping from a height of 24 miles. And two, 24 miles is rather high for any skydiver to jump from. Now, I do realise that that's basically the same problem, just reworded, but it was such a biggie, I thought it was worth mentioning twice.
No parachute ever devised has been able to successfully deploy at that altitude.
Oh, really? This is the parachute that MAGE used. It's a 3-foot parachute, and it deployed at 38.25 kilometres, about 24.5 miles.
They simply stream straight back, then never fill the rest of the way down. Joe Kittinger's record highest, fastest, and longest parachute dive from the Earth's upper atmosphere had him free-falling from only 19 miles high for 15 minutes at 767 miles per hour.
Right.
And his drogue chute proved useless and offered no deceleration. Yet NASA would have us believe, for example, that their 2008 Phoenix's drone parachute managed to somehow slow it down from 12,738 miles per hour to 123 miles per hour in just 2.86 minutes before its final landing.
The third and final Aspire test launched on September 7th. The parachute was deployed at nearly twice the speed of sound. In less than half a second, 200 pounds of nylon, Kevlar, and Technora go from a small drum-sized bag with the density of wood to an inflated parachute with the volume of a large house, generating nearly 70,000 pounds of drag. In slow-motion images, you can see the rapid emergence of the parachute as it begins generating the drag crucial for deceleration at Mars. These images give us amazing insights into the physics and early behaviors of a supersonic parachute inflation. The apparent ease of the unfurling and unfolding in the parachute belies the severity of the extreme environment in which this occurs. After 3 successful tests of Aspire, NASA has now tested their new parachute at loads and conditions exceeding any large supersonic parachute before it, and 40% higher than the highest load expected for the Mars 2020 mission.
Well, we seem to have got something there.
In other words, NASA is claiming to do something on Mars that we have no evidence is even possible on Earth at significantly lower altitude and 16 times slower speed.
So do you not think, Eric, if you're comparing 0.3% atmospheric pressure on Mars with 0.3% at 24 miles up on Earth, but at 16 times the speed, you're going to hit 16 times the volume of atmosphere?
NASA must have since gotten the memo because this time, for Perseverance, they claim instead that they fitted it with a special aeroshell and heat shield, which allows the, quote, drag of the Martian atmosphere to do all the heavy lifting for them.
Oh wow, Eric, you know so much about NASA and about space missions, but have you never heard of an ablative heat shield? All re-entry vehicles have them. They have to. They're initially slowed down by friction of the atmosphere. If they didn't have that heat shield, they'd just burn up.
Somehow slowing the craft from over 12,500 miles per hour to just 1,000 miles per hour before deploying the parachute. But again, even delving into these facts and figures is superfluous, because NASA simply shows us CGI pictures of a car on a parachute, and nobody questions it anyway.
Well, dumb flat earthers and conspiracy nuts question it. Everyone else realised that during the initial landing, there was no one there to film it. Later on, of course, Perseverance released its own video footage.
NASA.gov says that, quote, the Perseverance spacecraft departs Earth at a speed of about 24,600 miles per hour, about 39,600 kilometers per hour.
Yes, it needed to achieve orbital escape velocity. Otherwise it'd be coming back down again.
The trip to Mars will take about 7 months and about 300 million miles, 480 million kilometers. The actual fastest vehicle that exists is the SR-71 Blackbird fighter jet, which can travel an incredible Mach 3.3 or 2100 miles per hour.
I hate to point it out to you, Eric, but that's an atmospheric vehicle. It's an aircraft. It operates in the air. And for instance, the International Space Station, you can see that pass overhead at about 22,000 miles per hour.
With no evidence whatsoever, NASA claims this ridiculous-looking CGI cupcake on a hot plate can achieve speeds 12 times faster than the fastest actual flying vehicle in the world.
Well, it was launched by a powerful rocket that had a shed load of thrust to build up an enormous speed. Having achieved that speed, what's going to slow it down? It's no longer in the atmosphere. There is no friction. And unlike the Blackbird, it doesn't have to continue to provide thrust. Once it's going, it's going. I believe that's called conservation of momentum.
These are all smoking gun pieces of evidence that NASA is faking these supposed Mars
Are
landings.
you sure that's anything to do with NASA, Eric? Because to my eyes, that looks an awful lot like ESA, the European Space Agency. The fail just keeps coming, doesn't it, Eric? This facility is in Stevenage in the UK and it's owned by Airbus and has been used to test Martian rovers and so on. Oh dear. Do you know there's a biblical story about someone called Thomas? Only I think he's got nothing on you, has he? Mr. Doubting Dubay. Until next time, stay sensible.
Shut up and sit down.